නව ටොමෙක්ස් පැල්ලම් සහ විස බීජ අවම කර දින 3ක් දක්වා ටොයිලට් එක ෆ්‍රෙෂ්ව තමයි. ටොමෙක්ස්.
Tonight, without extraneous constraints, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa assures freedom to discharge central bank functions independently. Bridging finance. Sri Lanka's envoy in New Delhi meets Indian finance minister over expanding and restructuring credits for essential commodities, fuel and balance of payment support. Energy transition. Rapid renewable energy generation plan to kickstart on the 1st of June as deliberations underway for tariff hike amid potential generation costs. Milestone. Golface protest marks 50th consecutive day. Tensions high as demonstrations disrupts vehicular traffic. Tear gas and water cannon to disperse gatherings. All this and much more coming up on this Saturday, the 28th of May, 2022.
දක්වා ඉස්සොරින් නැති 100ක් සුසිනිඳු කෙස් කලමක් ලබා දෙයි. Dove Anti-Dandruff.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. You're joining us on AdaDerana English News on AdaDerana 24, and I'm Indivari Amwat. Now, Sri Lankan High Commissioner to India, Milinda Moragoda, during a meeting with Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, has raised the need for bridge financing for Sri Lanka until the economic adjustment program with the IMF is negotiated and finalized. As a result, the two parties have agreed to set up a mechanism at official level to conduct bilateral economic dialogue. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe expressed gratitude to Japan and India for their positive response after a proposal made by the Sri Lankan Premier to Quad member states, the United States, India, Japan and Australia, to take the lead in setting up a foreign aid consortium to assist Sri Lanka. The Japanese government said earlier that both India and Japan have agreed to work together on assisting crisis-hit Sri Lanka following a recent meeting between Prime Ministers Narendra Modi and Fumio Kishida in Tokyo.
Sri Lanka's High Commissioner to India, Milinda Moragoda, met with Indian Finance Minister and Corporate Affairs Nirmala Sitharaman yesterday to evaluate the status of ongoing economic cooperation and to discuss the way forward. He particularly appreciated her taking up the case of Sri Lanka on the sidelines of the IMF spring meetings in April in Washington, D.C. with the IMF, other multilateral institutions and bilateral development partners. The High Commissioner reiterated that Sri Lanka would require bridging finance until the economic adjustment program with the IMF could be negotiated and finalized. In this context, the Minister and the High Commissioner explored the possibility of increasing and restructuring assistance provided by India in the form of credits for essential commodities and fuel, as well as balance of payment support. In this regard, it has been agreed that the establishment of official level mechanism for conducting the economic dialogue between the two countries should continue. Chief Economic Advisor of the Government of India, Professor Anantha Nageswaran, who leads the Indian side at the official level discussions, and senior officials of the High Commission of India in New Delhi also participated in the meeting. Meanwhile, taking to Twitter, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe expressed his gratitude to India and Japan for the positive response on the proposal made to Quad members, the United States, India, Japan and Australia to take the lead in setting up a foreign aid consortium to assist Sri Lanka. The Quad Leaders Summit was held earlier this week where leaders of four nations, Indian PM Narendra Modi, US President Joe Biden, Japanese PM Fumio Kishida and Australian PM Anthony Albanese met and discussed issues related to the Indo-Pacific issues apart from the Ukraine war and other global matters. On the sidelines of the summit, India and Japan agreed to work together on assisting crisis-hit Sri Lanka, the Japanese government said after the meeting between Prime Ministers Modi and Kishida. Premier Wickremesinghe meanwhile said he had a conversation with Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, during which he expressed Sri Lanka's appreciation for the support India has extended during this difficult period. PM Wickremesinghe added that he looks forward to further strengthening ties between India and Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka received a 2 metric ton consignment of anesthetics and pharmaceutical drugs to the value of €300,000 by the French government. The consignment was sent to the country as part of a request made by the Sri Lankan government to the European Union for assistance in this time of need.
The government of France donated a consignment of anesthetic and respiratory medicines worth €300,000 following a request made by the Sri Lankan government. The consignment, which estimates to nearly 115 million Sri Lankan rupees, was symbolically handed over to the Minister of Health, Keheliya Ramukwella, by Ambassador of France to Sri Lanka, Eric Lavatu.
There are two areas where we are seriously concerned. Primarily it's health, then the food security. As far as the health is concerned, we are doing all our best to ensure that the critical and essential medicines are available and the normal functions to take place in the health sector. And to meet that end, I think various friends of ours have extended their cooperation, and particularly our ambassador been here with the consignment of essentials and some critical medicines that are required for the theatres to function effectively and efficiently.
It was a request of the Sri Lankan government to the European Union governments, and the French government answered with a consignment of about 2 metric tons of medicines, especially anesthetics, urgently needed by the health system in Sri Lanka. We are quite happy to have this occasion to support the health system of Sri Lanka and the population of Sri Lanka. It's important for us to participate, even if it's small consignment, to the support of the country.
A U.S. ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chung, says she is hopeful that the Sri Lankan government, including the new Prime Minister, will be able to bring about political stability to the country and overcome the current economic crisis. She made these remarks during a meeting with Speaker Mahinda Abewardena at the parliamentary complex yesterday. Now, during the meeting, the U.S. envoy emphasized the need to carry out political reforms desired by the people and to safeguard democracy in the country. She also said that she hopes to enhance relations between the two countries through the Sri Lanka-US Parliamentary Friendship Association. Ambassador Chung also appreciated the role played by the Women Parliamentary Caucus and discussed the need to increase representation of women in Sri Lanka's parliament. Speaker Abewardena, meanwhile, expressed his gratitude to the United States for its continued support to strengthening democracy in Sri Lanka. In a bid to overcome the ongoing power crisis, government announced a rapid renewable energy generation plan from the 1st of June. The plan will include recommendations to heavy electricity consumers, including hotels and industries, in installing rooftop solar panels in order to reduce the burden on the national grid. Further, Minister of Power and Energy said that a proposed electricity tariff revision will be implemented due to the rise in fuel costs in the generation of electricity.
Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara revealed that the fuel bill for power generation has exceeded $100 million per month, where the average cost incurred in generating an electricity unit has risen to 48 rupees. With that being the case, the minister said that the government is unable to supply electricity at current rates due to the prevailing shortage of foreign reserves, making it difficult for Sri Lanka to import fuel. The only solution, he believes, is a revision in the electricity tariffs. According to the Ceylon Electricity Board, the last tariff revision was in 2014, when electricity tariffs were slashed by 25%.
අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා මේ රටේ අවුරුදු 9ක් පුරා පැවතිලා තිබුණු මෙවැනි මිල ගණන් යම් සංශෝධනයක් විය යුතුයි කියන එක විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලය නිරන්තරයෙන් ඉල්ලීම් කරලා තියෙනවා. මහජන උපයෝගිතා කොමිසම පවා මේ සඳහා යම් යෝජනා ඉදිරිපත් කරලා තියෙනවා. නමුත් කිසිම දෙයකට තාම අනුමැතිය ලැබිලා නැහැ. අපි මේ පිළිබඳව කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලෙත් සාකච්ඡා කරා. මේ පිළිබඳව අධිකරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා දැනුවත් කරා. එස අපි යෝජනා කරනවා විශේෂයෙන්ම අඩු ආදායම් ලාභී තීරුවල සහ රජයේ රෝහල් ගොඩනැගිලි වල ඒ සංශෝධනය මේ අවස්ථාවෙන් මේලත් අඩුම තරමේ සංශෝධනය කළ හැකි ක්ෂේත්‍ර සඳහා විදුලි ඒකක විශාල ප්‍රමාණයක් භාවිතා කරන. එහෙමත් නැත්නම් විදුලි ඒකක විශාල ප්‍රමාණයක් භාවිතා වන කර්මාන්ත වෙන්න පුළුවන්. පෝටල් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ සඳහා යම් ගාස්තු සංශෝධනයක් කඩිනමින් විය යුතුයි කියන එක අපි යෝජනා කළා තියෙනවා. එනිසා මම බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා මහජන උපයෝගිතා කොමිසමෙත් අනුමැතියත් කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලෙත් අනුමැතියත් ඇතිව මේ කටයුත්ත යම් කාලයක් ලබා දීලා ඒ කටයුත්ත කරන්න.
While plans are underway to implement an electricity tariff hike, the government also intends to commence a rapid renewable energy generation plan from the 1st of June to overcome the power crisis. One such suggestion under this plan is the installation of rooftop solar panels in industries, hotels, and in government buildings during the month of June, as a possible revision in electricity tariffs are expected to triple electricity bills in these sectors.
අපි ලිඛිතව ඉල්ලීමක් යවනවා සියලුම මේ ආයතන වල ප්‍රධානීන්ට රජයේ ආයතන ඇතුළුව පෞද්ගලික ආයතන වල කර්මාන්ත ශාලාවල සියලු දෙනාට අපි ඔවුන්ට යවනවා යම් කිසි හේකින් අපිට විදුලි බිල වැඩි කරන්න සිදු වුණොත් ඔවුන්ට විදුලි බිල හැටියට ගෙවිය යුතු මුදල මෙන්න මේ ප්‍රමාණය වෙනවා කියන එක අපි ඔවුන්ට යවනවා. ඒ අනුව ඔවුන්ට පුළුවන් ඔවුන් විදුලි බිල වෙනුවෙන් දැනටත් ආයෝජනය කරන මුදල මාසිකව ආයෝජනය කරන මුදල සූර්ය පැනල සඳහා ආයෝජනය කරොත් මාසිකව ගෙවීම් කටයුතු කරන්න අපි මේ සමාගම් එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කරනවා. එතකොට ඔවුන්ට ඒ පැනල් එක ලබා දෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ තුලින් අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන ඔවුන්ගේ විදුලි බිල වැඩි කරගන්නේ නැතුව ඒ වගේම විදුලි බල පද්ධතියෙන් ඒ විදුලිය ලබා ගන්නේ නැතුව අපිට විදුලි බල පද්ධතියටත් යම් සහනයක් ලබා දෙන්න. එතකොට ඔවුන්ට දවල් කාලයේ සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම සූර්ය පැනලය මගින් උත්පාදනය වෙන විදුලියෙන් ඔවුන්ට කටයුතු කරන්න පුළුවන්. යම්කිසි ආකාරයක වලාකුළු තත්වයක් හෝ රාත්‍රී කාලේ පවත්වාගෙන යනවා ඒකට ඔවුන්ට ග්‍රිඩ් එකෙන් ගන්න පුළුවන්. අපේ විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලය මිලදී ගැනීමේ කටයුතු සඳහා අවශ්‍ය උපකරණ ගෙන්වා ගැනීම සඳහා අපි මහ බැංකුව සහ මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශ සමග කතා කරනවා. අපි බලනවා ඉන්දියානු ණය ක්‍රමය යටතේ සූර්ය පැනල ලංකාවට ගෙන්වා දීමට පුළුවන්ද කියලා පෞද්ගලික ආයතන වලට චීනය මගින් යෝජනා කරලා තිබෙන ණය ක්‍රමය යටතේ ගේන්න පුළුවන්ද කියලා අපි සොයා බලනවා.
Under the Rapid Renewable Energy Generation Plan, the Ministry of Power has also ordered the Sustainable Energy Authority and the Ceylon Electricity Board to provide provisional approvals for the proposed renewable energy projects.
හුඟක් වෙලාවට කියන්නේ මේ පුනර්ජනීය බලශක්ති ව්‍යාපෘති වලට යනකොට අපිට දෙන්න බෑ අනුමැතිය ට්‍රාන්ස්මිෂන් ලයින් එක නැහැ. අපිට මේක දෙන්න බෑ අපේ ග්‍රිඩ් කැපැසිටි එක නැහැ. මේක තමයි සමහරලාට බොහෝ වෙලාවට කියන දේවල්. ග්‍රිඩ් කැපැසිටි එක හදලා ඉන්න ට්‍රාන්ස්මිෂන් එක හදලා ඉන්න මේක දෙන්න කියලා කියන්නේ. අපි නමුත් ඒක වෙනස් කරා. ඒක වෙනස් කළා අපි කිව්වා මේකට අනුමැතිය දෙන්න. අනුමැතිය දීලා ඉවරලා ඒ ආයෝජනය කරන පුද්ගලයාගෙන් ට්‍රාන්ස්මිෂන් ලයින් එක හැදිලා නැත්නම් ග්‍රිඩ් කැපැසිටි එක හැදිලා නැත්නම් ඔහුගේ ආයෝජනයෙන්ම විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයේ මුදල් උපයෝගී කරගෙන මේක අවුරුදු ගාණක් ඇදෙනවට වැඩිය ට්‍රාන්ස්මිෂන් ලයින් එක හදලා ග්‍රිඩ් කැපැසිටි එක හදලා ඉවරලා අනුමැතිය දීලා අවුරුදු 3කින් ආය ව්‍යාපෘතිය ආරම්භ කරනවා වෙනුවට ව්‍යාපෘතියට අනුමැතිය දීලා ව්‍යාපෘතියට අවශ්‍ය පහසුකම් ටික ඒ ආයෝජකයාගේ හරහාම සිදු කර ගැනීම සඳහා දැන් උපදෙස් ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා.
As we speak about managing the fuel crisis and the energy crisis, what system is in place to manage other aspects of the crisis? Let's take the food security question as we speak today. I've invited to our studios Siri Hettige, Professor Emeritus of Sociology from the University of Colombo. A warm welcome to you, Professor.
Yes, I can hear you, yeah.
Professor, tell us what you think about the current situation and how we are approaching towards food security, because we're seeing a crisis in energy, fuel, essential commodities and items as we face a severe dearth in foreign reserves.
Yeah, this is really an unfortunate situation that has arisen out of the present crisis. But on the other hand, for a country like Sri Lanka, it would not be so difficult to produce enough food needed by the people in the country, provided that we have made the necessary arrangements for the production of food by farmers, as well as processing of whatever the farmers produce, in their own areas. But of course, now we have a situation where, on the one hand, we do not have enough foreign exchange to pay for everything that we have to import, and therefore food is also going to be a problem. But on the other hand, we also have a problem in the country in terms of food production because of certain setbacks in the agricultural sector. Now, of course, it has become even worse because of the fuel shortages, and the farmers are unable to, use, their machinery for doing their, agricultural activities, and then also, of course, later on, maybe even processing of whatever they produce, the milling and so on and so forth. So there are opportunities, and in fact, we have been discussing these things for a long time, but only when there is a crisis that many people start talking about food security.
Now, Professor,
but anyway,
Yes.
But that is
you say we have opportunities. You say we have opportunities, and it is only when we have a crisis that we're talking about food security. But do we have a system in place now to move ahead? Because there are warnings of a global recession. There are warnings and risks that Sri Lanka will face a severe dearth in food and essentials going forward if you do not get the necessary bridging finance.
Yeah, I think this is really a big issue because whether we are organized, as a country, as a state, to really respond to this very big challenge, not only in the area of food security but also medicine, transportation, fuel, and so forth, and then also, of course, various other things that people really need to lead a normal life. Now, the point is whether we are really organized, today in this country to manage this very complex crisis. Of course, we have institutions, we have people, but the fact of the matter is that this is a very, very special situation, and we cannot really rely entirely on the existing, machinery, institutions and people, because we have to adapt to this new situation, and therefore we have to have some innovative approach to managing this crisis by way of, putting in place, certain administrative systems in a streamlined and also in a coordinated fashion.
How do you suggest we approach this situation? What systems do you recommend that we put in place?
Yeah, I think we cannot really, manage these things all together. We have to really figure out, how to sort things out. On the one hand, we have the domestic situation that we have to manage, in terms of food security, in terms of health, in terms of various other necessities that the people need, like what we are talking about, like fuel and various other things. And then also, other issues arising out of these crises, like, for instance, public order issues, and then, crime and all these things, and various other, problems that you observe when you move around the country. So the point is that we have to put in place, certain administrative mechanisms that would help us sort these things out. For instance, we have to on the one hand deal with the international community, like multilaterals, bilaterals, and also, of course, global civil society to get the maximum support that we need at this very, very difficult time. And that can be, of course, done, in a separate, arrangement that, we put in place. For instance, you can have a, I don't see kind of a national level arrangement like a council that would really be responsible for the management of the crisis, both in terms of, let's say the global, issues that we have to sort out, and also the domestic problems that we have to manage. So I think we have to, basically figure out how to put in place such management system. And then, of course, you have to have sectoral, committees that would, deal with, various sectoral issues, like, for instance, we have to deal with the agriculture sector issues, food security issues, and then also the most important transportation, because transportation can really bring the whole country to a standstill.
Right.
If you have, and of course now productivity of our labor, because people are wasting so much of their time, waiting for various things like fuel and so on, and then also not being able to really move around even to do their work. So I think we are in a real crisis, not just an economic crisis alone. It has so many ramifications. So I feel that we have to really rethink how we are going to get organized as a country to manage the domestic problems that have arisen, and also the various problems that we encounter in dealing with the international community.
Right.
I'm not really familiar with what has been going on, because I'm not part of the internal kind of dynamics, so I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that we need to really revisit the arrangements that we have in terms of how we are managing this crisis.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor, for your time here at our studios. Joining us virtually, we had with us Professor Siri Hettige, Professor Emeritus of Sociology from the University of Colombo. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll take a short break now and return for more news after this break.
Big 3.
Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara says they expect to produce 1,000 metric tons of diesel daily from the Sapukaskanda oil refinery once it recommences operations soon. Once again, he requested the public not to hoard fuel, as strict measures are in place to arrest suspects and seize hoarded fuel.
Once the operations at the Sapukaskanda oil refinery recommences, the Ministry of Power and Energy expects to produce 1,000 metric tons of diesel daily and release it to the market, which is expected to provide somewhat of relief to the people. To fulfill this purpose, the main requirement is crude oil. A Siberian crude oil shipment that arrived in Colombo began unloading yesterday. With speculations rife that the shipment was from Russia due to the product being Siberian oil, the Minister of Power and Energy moved to refuse claims, saying that the supplier is a Dubai-based company known as Coral Energy Private Limited.
The Siberian crude oil consignment, this was arranged before I took office. So there was a tender that was being floated, but no bidders were there for the tender. So there were individual companies who had given proposals to supply crude oil. So this has been done as a one-off consignment, a cargo. So the arrangement was that we open up a NRRA account, that's a non-residential rupee account. So there's a tri-party agreement between the supplier, the bank and the petroleum corporation, where we deposit the money in rupee terms, and after a 30-day period or a 60-day period as agreed with the supplier, the central bank governor has given undertaking to convert the rupee amounts into dollars to be given to the supplier. So this is the arrangement that we have. The next shipment will also be ordered on the same basis, because we need another crude oil consignment in the next couple of weeks to keep the Sapukaskanda refinery going, but we want to enter into long-term contracts. So we have started a tender procedure. So whoever wants to provide crude oil with the financial restrictions that we have, if we can go into the same sort of arrangement, it will be easier for the CPC, less burden on the treasury as well. It's Dubai-based supplier, Coral Energy, so it's not a Russian company.
However, the Sri Lankan government requested Russia to assist in overcoming the energy crisis. At the media briefing today, Minister Wijesekara confirmed that he made an official request to the Russian ambassador during a recent meeting with him.
I have made an official request from the Russian ambassador here in Sri Lanka. I had the opportunity to meet His Excellency ambassador. We discussed the possibilities of importing certain requirements, because as you know, we have a coal power plant which is being supplied from Russian suppliers through Singaporean companies even in the past. So there are companies who are based in different parts of the world which we are speaking with, and we are open to discussing any possibilities to obtain the requirements that we have. We are more focusing on to get the crude oil finalized first, but crude oil alone will not fulfill our requirements, because
the Energy Minister tweeted that by 8:15 am today, the government had 17,077 metric tons of auto diesel and 1,072 metric tons of super diesel in stock at the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation's Kolonava and Muthurajavela terminals. The availability of 92-octane petrol is 37,391 metric tons, while it is 6,142 metric tons for 95-octane petrol. The minister says that the government has necessary fuel stocks to last the next 2 weeks. However, he urged the general public not to stockpile fuel, which can deplete these reserves before the expected period of time due to the artificial rise in fuel demand. Further, ongoing raids in search of those who stockpiled fuel have led to the arrest of a large number of suspects, along with over 50,000 litres of petrol, diesel and kerosene. In more measures to nab suspects who hoard fuel, an application developed by the police was introduced to fuel stations yesterday to monitor vehicles that pump fuel.
ඉන්ධන පෙරෝම්හලකට පැමිණෙන වාහනේ අංකය විතරයි යොදන්නේ ඒ ඇප් එකේ. ඒ යෙදුවම සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඒක ඒ අවස්ථාවේම අනිකුත් පෙරෝම්හල් වල ඒ ඇප් එක පාවිච්චි කරන නිලධාරීන්ට ඒක යාවත්කාලීන වෙනවා. ඒ යාවත්කාලීන විලිම තුලින් අවස්ථා දෙකකදී තුනකදී එකම දවසේ විවිධ පෙරෝම්හල් වලින් ඉන්ධන තොග එකතු කරන පිරිස් පිළිබඳව අනාවරණලා තියෙනවා. එවැනි පිරිස් 1200කට වැඩි පිරිසක් ඊයේ දවසේ පමණක් පොලිසියට නවත්වා ගැනීමට හැකියලා තියෙනවා කියන එක ඔවුන් අපිට වාර්තා කරලා තිබෙනවා.
Meanwhile, on the gas situation, Litrogas Lanka Limited said today that distribution of domestic LP gas cylinders will not be carried out tomorrow, and therefore they urge the public not to stand in queues to obtain gas. With that, tomorrow will be the 6th consecutive day that domestic gas cylinders will not be distributed in the island-wide.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has assured the central bank's governor and the monetary board his fullest and unqualified assurance of freedom to discharge their functions independently and without any extraneous constraints. This was conveyed at a meeting held with Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe and Monetary Board member President's Counsel Sanjeev Jayawardena earlier today. During the meeting, the Central Bank Governor gave a full briefing on the satisfactory progress of talks with the IMF at the technical stage and emphasized the importance of advancing towards securing IMF assistance expeditiously, which would in turn facilitate the all-important debt restructuring process. He had also briefed the President on the numerous multi-pronged measures put in place by the Central Bank with the support of the Monetary Board in respect of economic recovery. The President had then expressed his confidence in these measures and also assured an interactive process and indicated that the Governor and the Monetary Board would be accorded any assistance required in his capacity as the head of state, including engaging with his international counterparts at the highest level of state engagement in order to assist Sri Lanka's economic recovery. Now, 3 senior police officers, including Senior DIG Ajit Rohana, have been transferred based on service requirements. Accordingly, Senior DIG Ajit Rohana, in charge of the Crimes and Traffic Range, has been relocated as the Senior DIG of the Southern Province. Senior DIG in charge of the Southern Province, Rajitha Sri Daminda, has received a transfer as the Senior DIG of the Eastern Province. Acting Senior DIG Kamal Silva, in the meantime, who was in charge of the Eastern Province, was relocated to as the Senior DIG of Crimes and Traffic Range. Sri Lanka Police said that the transfers were approved by the Public Service Commission and the Secretary to the Ministry of Public Security. Now, the Golf-Face protest marked its 50th consecutive day today, and a demonstration was held to mark the milestone. However, the Fort Police had proceeded to obtain a court order preventing the organizers of the protest march from entering certain roads. Nevertheless, this did not deter the protesters from marching forward. The protesters at the Golf-Face Green, along with those at Kolpiti, marched towards the Lotus Road. However, they were met with opposition as the police had set up barricades along the street. As the protesters tried to proceed, tear gas and water cannons were fired on the protesters to disperse them. President of the Bar Association, President's Counsel Salia Pires, says people must remember the importance of being strategic when fighting for the rights of the people. President of the Bar made these remarks with regard to the role of the youth in the present context of Sri Lanka's crisis. Also speaking on the same subject, corporate leader Kasturi Chellaraja Wilson emphasized on the importance of remembering the core values that make a human being.
A panel discussion on the current economic, social and political climate in Sri Lanka was organized yesterday at the General Sir John Kotalala Defence University Auditorium under the theme Voice of the Youth for an Empowered Future.
All of us didn't know what the right policy should be, didn't push anybody to do the right thing. You have to get educated what it is, about what the problem is and what the corrective action is. Because if you don't understand what reforms mean, you're going to react. So that's firstly. With that knowledge, you have to make sure that we stand up for what the right things need to be done in the political system. In the political system now, you can't change it overnight. But at least we should be making sure we have the right people there and make some accountability, not to hammer them at every mistake. Whatever said or done, don't let a political agenda or a racial agenda or a mere malicious agenda influence us to turn against each other. And we also have to make sure we get the law, the enforcement officers to do their job to protect us. We can't be taking law onto our hands. And I think all of us as a country have had a base of religion, whichever is the religion. We were never taught to go and burn a house and say very good, kill a person and say very good. We have come to this. So get the fundamentals of being what a good human being is and help each other. You all have an ecosystem.
Important is to be vigilant about our rights. I think for far too long we have, as a community, we have kept quiet and let things pass. We must not let fear stop us from taking a position. I think it's so very important at this time to take a position. Sometimes it is difficult to take a position when you think you are right, but you know that sometimes many others might take a different view. But I think we have to do that. But we also have to be conscious that violence does not pay result. When I say violence, it is not only going to the streets and burning, also not to promote violence. So for example, if on Facebook, if we were to share an address of someone who we think ought to be dealt with, that is wrong. Violence defeats the objective. I think we should look for the non-violent approach, and that non-violent approach has succeeded. We also have to be strategic. You know that a compass shows you the north, but it doesn't show you how you get to the north. If you just go directly traveling north, you will fall into a swamp. You have to be strategic to know when to fight, when to remain silent, but not to forget the ultimate goal.
Taking you to some business news, Standard & Poor's global ratings lowered 2 Sri Lankan sovereign bonds to D from CC. 2 $1.5 billion Sri Lanka sovereign bonds maturing in 2025 and 2027 were subject to rating action after interest coupons were missed. Standard & Poor's meanwhile affirmed its long-term and short-term foreign currency sovereign ratings on Sri Lanka at selective default and affirmed their CCC- long-term and C short-term local currency sovereign ratings. The outlook on the local currency ratings remains negative. S&P said the negative outlook on the local currency ratings reflect the high risks to commercial debt repayments over the next 12 months in the context of Sri Lanka's economic, external and fiscal pressures. In the downside scenario, S&P said it could lower the local currency ratings if there are indications of non-payment or restructuring of Sri Lanka rupee-denominated obligations. On the upside scenario, the rating agency said it could revise the outlook to stable or raise the local currency ratings if it perceived that the likelihood of government's local currency debt being excluded from any debt restructuring has increased. This could be the case if, for example, the government receives significant donor funding, which given to some time to implement immediate and transformative reforms. And that's all for tonight. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.